Good morning. Today we will be continuing Who Was Christopher Columbus? I will be reading 2 chapters today, so we will start with chapter 6, Shipwreck. By early December, the Pinta had gone off on its own to find gold. The weather was turning colder and stormy. If the Niña and the Santa Maria were to return to Spain before winter set in, they had to leave soon. But there was still more to explore, Columbus thought, so he ordered his ships to sail. On December 6th, Columbus named the island they landed on Hispaniola because the trees reminded him of Spain. Then on Christmas Eve, disaster struck. Some men were celebrating. After a long night, Columbus went to sleep. So did most of the crew of the Santa Maria. One of the ship's boys was left in charge. The wind was calm and the ship was moving at a slow pace. Yet sometime after midnight, the Santa Maria crashed into a coral reef. A cry rang out and Columbus was awoken. Desperately, he tried to save the ship, but it was too late. Her sides had ripped open. The Santa Maria was sinking. Columbus called for help. A local Taino chief sent men and canoes. They unloaded the Santa Maria and brought the goods and supplies ashore. Besides helping unload the ship, the natives brought gold. Not a lot, just a few samples, masks, jewelry, and other small trinkets. After he got over the shock of losing his ship, Columbus took the sinking of the Santa Maria as a sign. God meant for him to go ashore on this island. After all, the chief had given Columbus rings, necklaces, and masks made of gold, and gold was what they had come for. Perhaps now they could go home. But Columbus had only one ship left. Martin Pinzon and the Pinta were still missing. They couldn't all return to Spain on the small Niña, so Columbus built a fort. 40 men would remain there through the winter. They would look for gold. When Columbus returned, he would bring them and the gold home. Columbus used wood from the Santa Maria to build the fort. A moat was dug around the fort, and Santa Maria's cannons were put up. Columbus named the fort La Navidad. That is Spanish for Christmas. The Niña was loaded with fresh food and water. With what little gold he had, Columbus headed home on January 4th, 1493. After 2 days at sea, the Niña came upon an amazing sight, the Pinta. The two ships met and continued the voyage home together until a bad storm separated them again. Columbus feared that the Pinta might be lost forever. The storm grew fiercer. What if they drowned? Then nobody would know that the voyage had been successful. So Columbus grabbed a piece of parchment and wrote about his discovery of new lands. He wrapped the letter in cloth, covered it in a cake of wax, and placed it in a barrel. Hopefully one day someone would find the barrel and read about what Columbus had accomplished. The storm raged for 15 days. Even so, Columbus sailed on. After all, what choice did he have? On March 15th, Columbus dropped anchor in the waters. Sorry, we just had our safety visit, so I'll start that paragraph again. On March 15th, Columbus dropped anchor in the water of Palos. It had been almost 7.5 months since he had last seen this beautiful harbor. What joy he must have felt. And amazingly, the Pinta had also made it home safely. Of course, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella wanted to see Columbus right away, so he set off for Barcelona. Everywhere, people ran out into the streets to catch a glimpse of Columbus and his crew. The people had never seen Indians or parrots or corn before. At last, Columbus reached the royal court. There, under a golden canopy, sat Ferdinand and Isabella. As Columbus approached the king and queen, the royal couple stood up. Only a great lord would receive such a greeting. Columbus kissed their hands and sat down next to them. Then he described his journey. Columbus showed off the treasures he had brought back. Colorful parrots, gold nose rings, not a lot of gold, to be sure, but some, and he had brought corn. Yams, yucca, no one was laughing at Christopher Columbus now. Best of all, the king and queen kept their word. Columbus was given the title of Admiral of the Ocean Sea. He was made Governor General of all the lands he discovered, and he got to keep 1/10 of all the treasure he had brought back. Christopher Columbus was a hero. He rode through Barcelona seated next to the king. People cheered. This was the greatest moment of his life. Soon his glory days would be over. Chapter 7, On the Sea Again. Orders were given for Columbus's second trip. He was to return to Hispaniola, bring back the crew left there, and leave more men to settle the land. Columbus was elated. Here was another chance to bring back gold. On his first voyage, Columbus practically had to beg men to join him. This time, between 1,200 and 1,500 men eagerly volunteered. Who knew what riches would be found on the trip? Now, the crew included priests to convert the natives, noblemen, farmers, and other skilled laborers. Even Columbus's younger brother Diego signed on. Columbus was given 17 ships. The Niña was part of the fleet. Columbus commanded a ship called the Santa Maria in honor of the one that had been wrecked. The ships were loaded with food and water. This time horses were brought along for the men to use once they reached land, as well as sheep and pigs to live on the farms, and seeds of wheat and barley to plant. On September 25th, 1493, the ship set off from the port of Cadiz. This time it was a much easier trip across the ocean. Columbus knew the way. No one complained. This is an insert. The islands of Columbus's second voyage. On his way back to Hispaniola, Columbus and his crew stopped at many islands. You can see some of them on this map. Dominica was the first island they came to. Columbus named it Dominica because it was discovered on a Sunday, November 3rd, 1493. On Guadalupe, Columbus and his men tasted pineapple for the first time. Santa Maria la Redonda was the round island. He also discovered the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. I'll show you the map up closer. Columbus checked out the new islands. He found cotton, more colorful parrots, and fruit. And oh, the scenery! Green mountains, wide valleys, sparkling rivers, foamy white waterfalls, but they also saw awful things. Women were captured and made slaves. Humans ate other humans. They are called cannibals. Columbus and his crew didn't stay very long on those islands. On the night of November 27th, 1493, the ships arrived in Hispaniola. Right away, one of the ships fired a cannon. There was no response from the shore. Where were the men who had stayed behind? What could have happened to them? Columbus and his crew were scared. Suddenly, they heard the sound of oars slapping the water. Could it be Columbus's men? No, it was a canoe filled with Tano, and they were bringing terrible news. The fort had burned down. All the Spaniards were dead. What had happened? It was unclear. Some said the Spaniards fought among themselves and killed each other. Others said the settlers had gotten terribly sick and died. Still others claimed a nearby tribe killed the Spaniards and burned down the settlement. Whatever the true story was, La Navidad was gone. A new settlement had to be built from scratch. In a hot, swampy area with no clean water, Columbus and his crew began to build a new colony. They called it Isabella in honor of their queen. It was a bad spot to choose. Mosquitoes and gnats swarmed around the men, biting their flesh. The men were not happy. This was not why they had come on the voyage. They wanted gold. To make matters worse, many men fell ill. Perhaps they got sick from the bug bites. Perhaps it was because there wasn't enough food to eat. The crops they planted weren't growing well, or maybe they were just plain tired. There was no choice but to send some of the fleet back to Spain for food and medicine. So on February 2nd, 1494, 12 ships returned home. Columbus remained behind. Why? His desire to find gold made him stay. He sent many groups of healthy men to search for it, but each time they came back empty-handed. They found specks of gold here and there in riverbeds, but not nearly enough to satisfy the king and queen. Word reached Columbus of rich gold fields at a place called Chibayo. So Columbus left his brother Diego in charge of Isabella and set off. Some gold was found, but just as before, not a lot. Where is Cipangu, the island that Marco Polo had described? For the first time, Columbus was starting to grow nervous. Columbus took 3 ships and sailed back to Cuba, as well as to the other islands he had visited. When Columbus returned to Hispaniola at the end of September 1494, he was very ill, and he still didn't have much gold. Back at Isabella, the mosquitoes seemed to have gotten larger. His men were getting sicker and angrier. Things were worse for the Taino, too. Columbus demanded that the Taino find gold for him. Every adult had to supply a certain amount of it or face severe punishment. The Taino tried to fight back. However, their simple swords, bows, and arrows were no match for the Spaniards' weapons. They had crossbows and muskets. With no gold for King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, Columbus decided to take many Taino back to Spain as slaves. It was a terrible thing to do, but Columbus felt that it was his right. After all, he had claimed the land for Spain, so wasn't it his right to claim the people too? The answer, of course, was no, it wasn't his right. Still, Columbus loaded ships with 500 Taino and sent them off to Spain. Perhaps the slaves could be sold at market and bring in money. Columbus was also nervous because he knew that word had gotten back to Ferdinand and Isabella that Columbus was not a good leader. He was stubborn and arrogant. Columbus concluded that he had to return to Spain to defend himself. Nothing that was going wrong was his fault. Perhaps God was punishing him. Columbus put his brothers Bartholomew and Diego in charge of Isabella. It was March 10th, 1496. He loaded up 2 small ships. Raising the anchors, Columbus headed back to Spain.